Auven.
On April 12, 2014, in the eastern Ukrainian city of Sloviansk, armed men walk into a police station. They are not wearing regular Ukrainian uniforms. They take the building, seize weapons, and raise a flag over a town most of the world has never watched closely. This is how the war in Donbas unfolded. Donbas is not one battlefield. It is a region. It sits in eastern Ukraine, built around Donetsk and Luhansk. Coal mines, steel plants, rail lines, highways, apartment blocks, open fields, industrial towns close enough to Russia that the border is never just a line on a map. Before 2014, Donbas was already politically complicated. Many people spoke Russian. Many had family or business ties across the border, but it was still internationally recognized as part of Ukraine. Then Kyiv erupted. In late 2013, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych walked away from a planned agreement with the European Union. Protests began in Kyiv. They grew. They turned violent. In February 2014, Yanukovych left the capital. A new government formed. Ukraine called it a revolution. Russia called it a coup. A month later, Russia annexed Crimea. The move was condemned by most of the world, but on the ground, Crimea was already gone. Then the pressure moved east. In Donetsk and Luhansk, pro-Russian demonstrations grew around government buildings. Some people wanted federalization. Some wanted closer ties to Moscow. Some wanted to separate from Ukraine entirely. Armed groups began taking police stations, city halls, and security buildings. In April 2014, the self-declared Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic appeared on the map. Ukraine rejected them. Russia did not formally absorb them at the time, but Ukraine and Western governments said Moscow was backing the armed separatists. Russia denied controlling them. The first hard point was Sloviansk. It sat north of Donetsk, close to Kramatorsk, on a road network that mattered. If you held Sloviansk, you could pressure the northern Donetsk region. If you lost it, the rebellion could be pushed back toward the larger cities. Ukraine launched what it called an anti-terrorist operation. At first, the plan looked simple. Retake the buildings, restore control, seal the border. But maps become deceptive in Donbas. A city is not a dot. It is roads, basements, railway yards, factories, tree lines, checkpoints, and people still trying to live inside them. By July 2014, Ukrainian forces had retaken Sloviansk. On a normal map, this looked like momentum, but the armed groups withdrew toward Donetsk, Orlivka, and Luhansk. Ukraine had taken one city. It had not closed the system that fed the war. Then came Ilovaisk. In August 2014, Ukrainian forces pushed toward the town east of Donetsk. The goal was to cut separatist positions and regain control around the city. Instead, Ukrainian units were surrounded. They attempted to withdraw through corridors. The withdrawal became one of the worst Ukrainian losses of the early war. Ukraine accused Russian regular forces of direct involvement. Moscow denied sending regular troops into the fighting. What was clear was the result. Ukraine's advance stopped. The first Minsk agreement was signed in September 2014. It called for a ceasefire. The war continued. One of the places where the ceasefire failed was Donetsk Airport. Before the war, it had a modern terminal built for Euro 2012. During the war, it became a concrete maze. Ukrainian defenders held parts of it for months. They were called cyborgs because they seemed impossible to dislodge. By January 2015, the terminal was destroyed. Ukraine withdrew. The airport no longer worked as an airport, but it worked as something else. It became proof that in Donbas, places can lose all practical value and still decide the rhythm of a war. Then came Debaltseve.
It is a road and rail
Debaltseve sits
junction.
between Donetsk and Luhansk. It is a road and rail junction. Ukrainian positions there formed a bulge into separatist-held territory. That made it useful. It also made it dangerous. In early 2015, Russian-backed forces pressed from both sides. The pocket narrowed. The second Minsk agreement was reached in February 2015. Again, it called for a ceasefire. Again, the fighting did not stop in time. Ukrainian forces withdrew from Debaltseve days later. After that, the war slowed down. It did not end. The line of contact became a scar across eastern Ukraine. Trenches, minefields, observation posts, snipers, mortars, drones, villages split by roads nobody could safely cross. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission watched and reported from 2014 until 2022. Its monitors counted ceasefire violations in a war that officially had peace agreements and unofficially had shelling almost every night. From April 2014 to the end of 2021, the UN Human Rights Office recorded 3,106 civilian deaths related to the conflict. If the 298 people killed on Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 are included, the civilian death toll reached at least 3,404. More than 7,000 civilians were estimated to have been injured. For 8 years, Donbas was a war many outside Ukraine stopped watching. Then, on February 21, 2022, Russia recognized the self-declared Donetsk and Luhansk republics as independent. 3 days later, Russian forces launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The old Donbas war was swallowed by something larger. At first, Russia attacked from several directions: Kyiv, Kharkiv, the south, the east. But after Russian forces failed to take Kyiv, Moscow shifted its main effort back toward Donbas. The goal became clearer: take all of Luhansk, take all of Donetsk. Turn the old separatist project into a Russian territorial claim. One of the first great sieges was Mariupol. Mariupol sits on the Sea of Azov, between Russian-held territory and Crimea. For Russia, it was a port, a land bridge, and a symbol. For Ukraine, it was the southern anchor of Donetsk region. The city was surrounded and pounded for weeks. The final Ukrainian defenders held out inside the Azovstal steelworks, a vast industrial complex with bunkers and tunnels below it. In May 2022, hundreds of Ukrainian fighters surrendered after weeks underground. Mariupol was effectively lost. Then the battle moved north. In Luhansk region, Russian forces ground forward through Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. Lysychansk was Ukraine's last major stronghold in the region. On July 3, 2022, Ukraine confirmed its forces had withdrawn. Russia claimed control of Luhansk. Ukraine said the battle was lost, not the war. Then came Bakhmut. Before the invasion, Bakhmut was not supposed to be the center of Europe's bloodiest battle. It was a salt mining city in Donetsk region. But by late 2022 and early 2023, Russian forces, including Wagner mercenaries, attacked it again and again. Ukraine held for months. Streets became ruins. Apartment blocks became firing positions. Roads into the city became killing zones. In May 2023, Russia claimed to have captured Bakhmut. Ukraine disputed some details at the time, but the city had already been turned into something barely resembling a city. Then came Avdiivka. Avdiivka sits just northwest of Donetsk city. Ukraine had held it since 2014. It had been on the front line for almost the entire war. In February 2024, Ukrainian forces withdrew after months of Russian assault. Russia took the city and pushed farther west. The pattern was now clear. Russia was not making clean breakthroughs across the whole front.
It was grinding forward,
one ruined city at a time, one junction at a time, one tree line at a time. Ukraine was trading space for time. But in Donbas, space is not empty. It is logistics, shelter, elevation, drone range, and the distance between one surviving city and the next destroyed one. By 2026, the central pressure had shifted toward the Donetsk fortress belt. Kostiantynivka, Druzhkivka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk. These are not castles. They are industrial cities, roads, hospitals, rail links, basements, and years of prepared positions. Kostiantynivka is the southern gate. If Russian forces take it, they gain a route toward the cities behind it. As of late June 2026, Reuters reported that Russian troops were pressing Kostiantynivka and that small Russian units had begun infiltrating the outskirts. Ukrainian commanders said the incursions were not yet enough for a rapid breakthrough. Analysts warned that the battle could become long and costly, like earlier sieges in the east. By the time this is published, the exact line around Kostiantynivka may have moved. That is the problem with mapping Donbas. The map is not fixed. It is a daily argument made with drones, artillery, roads, and men sent into towns that already look half erased. Russia says Donetsk and Luhansk are now part of Russia. Ukraine rejects that completely. In October 2022, the UN General Assembly condemned Russia's attempted annexation of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. The vote was 143 in favor, 5 against. But votes in New York do not stop shells in Donbas. In May 2026, the UN Human Rights Office reported at least 274 civilians killed and 1,763 injured across Ukraine, the highest total monthly civilian casualty figure since April 2022. Donbas is not the only place civilians are dying, but it remains one of the places where the war is most physically concentrated. This is why Donbas matters beyond Donbas. If Russia cannot break the fortress belt, its eastern campaign remains slow, expensive, and unfinished. If Ukraine cannot hold it, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk stop being cities behind the front. They become the next front. At the start, armed men walked into a police station in Sloviansk and changed the map with a flag. 12 years later, Sloviansk is still on the map. This time, it is waiting behind Kostiantynivka,